as perguntas e questionamentos sobre a apresentação do professor Trent. A primeira pergunta que eu tenho aqui, professor, ela fala sobre diferenças entre homem e mulher. Então, o questionamento é o seguinte: levando em conta as diferenças morfológicas entre homem e mulher, e que, em alguns casos, tornam o simples fato de ser mulher um fator de risco de lesões, quais as diferenças entre os homens e as mulheres que o senhor considera mais importante para aumentar o risco de lesões e comprometer a performance?
Obviously, there are basic physiological differences that we know about. Sorry, it's a little distracting. There are physiological differences that we know about. There are also biomechanical differences that we know about. There are things that we can change with training. There are things that we cannot change with training. So part of our technology is not addressing the physiological differences, not addressing the structural differences. This is a movement assessment. It is designed to assess human movement and identify risk factors that we know put people at risk. That being said, a part of our certification course is that we teach people the training methodologies. In that, we also consider a lot of the physiological differences between men and women, and it's going to change some of the interventions that we do. So whether it's hip proprioception is going to have a greater amount of training that is performed for the female athlete, or cardiovascular conditioning for the female athlete, or nutritional components for the female athlete. All of those are going to be addressed more in the training methodology than it is the movement assessment. The movement assessment is designed specifically to assess risk factors associated with movement. We can't address physiological differences. What we can address are those demographic factors that we know put people directly at risk. I hope that answered the question.
Próxima pergunta. O questionamento agora é sobre a abordagem após a detecção do comprometimento da cadeia cinética. Então, a pessoa que está perguntando quer saber do senhor qual a estratégia utilizada para fazer a correção desse movimento na cadeia cinética e como que o senhor planeja a execução desse tratamento.
Absolutely. That's actually my part I enjoy the most, is changing movement in people. And one of the things that our courses actually do is we take a little bit of a different approach. We bring in a lot of the neuro research into changing motor plans. To change a motor plan can sometimes be very difficult. But as they do in professional baseball, if a pitcher has bad throwing mechanics that they know is going to put them at risk for a labral tear, they start strategies right away to change motor plans. Now that pitcher may have been pitching since they were 9 years old, and now they're in their 20s. Can you really change those patterns? And you absolutely can, if you apply a lot of the methodology from the neuro research. So a lot of the stuff that we do is related to applying those two approaches in a sports or orthopedic realm. Let me give you an example. One of the things that we see is a lateral shift. And when you take a high-level athlete and you start correcting their lateral shift, what do they tell you? It feels weird, feels unusual. Why is that? It's because they've trained themselves that that lateral shift is normal. They have the motor plan that is showing that that is normal. Their proprioception is showing them that that is normal. So based on the research, what we know is that if you fatigue somebody, you reduce their proprioceptive input. So we can use that in our training methodology. For example, and in a high-level case, please keep that in mind, we'll have an athlete do 20 squats. Then what we will do is position them in the correct spot, and then based on the vibration research, we will overload their entire system with proprioceptive feedback through perturbations to their core, perturbations to their shoulders, to their knees, to their hips, to the entire system. Then we'll have them do some squats again. Again, fatiguing out that proprioception, placing them back into that position, and then overloading their system again. And what we find is that you can correct a lateral shift in as simple as 2 to 3 visits simply by fatiguing out their proprioception and training them and training them and training them in a hard way, an aggressive way, to really give them that sense of where proprioception or where their hips should be, but through their entire system, not just the hips.
Professor, a próxima pergunta é sobre a característica de posicionamento do atleta quando ele é informado de que não executa, principalmente o atleta de alto rendimento é informado que ele não executa um movimento da maneira correta. Então, a pessoa quer saber como o senhor convence um atleta bem-sucedido a mudar a biomecânica do seu movimento para uma proteção simplesmente pelo aspecto da imagem.
Absolutely. That is a big reason that we've created this system the way that we do. Is that when I, as Joe Blow, PT, go to an Olympic athlete and I say, I see this or I see that, the likelihood that they're going to believe me is much less. But when I can show them a picture of how they move, and I can correlate that movement to a loss of kinetic energy, when I can correlate that to a loss of vertical jump, when I can correlate that to a loss of sprint speed, it makes sense. And the beautiful thing about this, it's not rocket science. Any athlete that sees movements like what you saw on the videos here, and they see themselves move like that, they get it. They understand it. And a lot of times, and we just had this the last time we were down here teaching a course, is that the movements that we see are the same things that their coaches are telling them about with their running patterns or whatever their particular sport is. So bringing those two things together, the performance aspect as well as the injury aspect, really is key. But also allowing them to see their movement creates a psychological impact. That being said, I will say it can also backfire. And in our mini course, I was just telling the class about you have to be sensitive to the psychology of the athlete, because sometimes them seeing themselves move in that way can actually have the reverse effect. It can actually devastate them when they see how bad they are moving.
Bom, encerrando a atividade, vamos fazer uma última pergunta ao professor Nessler, e é referente ao plano de avaliação. A pessoa quer saber se o plano de avaliação utilizado é apenas o frontal e como abordar, como avaliar um atleta de lutas, por exemplo, que não tem uma predominância de movimento de membro inferior. Utiliza o membro inferior, mas também utiliza muito o tronco e os membros superiores para realizar o gesto esportivo.
Perfect. I actually had a picture of a mixed martial artist in there. And part of the reason that I had him in there is one of the sports that we used to cover when I was in Alabama was mixed martial arts. And unbeknownst to me, one of the common mechanisms for injuries with the mixed martial artists actually occurs as a non-contact A.C.L. injury with takedown. It's typically when they are shooting for their athlete to take them down that they fall into that adducted position in the frontal plane. And it's that driving in the shoot where they come in to shoot down and then drive up through their hips that they're falling into that adduction in the frontal plane. And so that is a devastating injury to a mixed martial artist. That also, we know, core strength, hip strength also has a big impact on power with a kick, for example. Now, are we assessing all of the upper kinetic chain? Absolutely not, and we don't profess to do that. What we are professing to do is to attack the majority of where injuries occur, but also where it has the biggest impact. And one of the things in his particular case, we actually present this in our course. In his particular case, we were actually timing his time to take down as in correlation to his improvement in his overall movement. And what we saw was that as his movement improved, his takedown time decreased, which, if anybody that participates in that sport knows, that is critical, because the speed at which you take somebody down is very important. So knowing that all of that impacts that particular type of athlete, and that we are only measuring that in the frontal plane, but that improvement in that frontal plane motion does translate over to improvement in that particular sport. Alô?
Alô. Muito obrigado, professor. Antes de fazer a entrega no centro do palco ali, a lembrança do professor Nessler, do certificado e uma lembrança da nossa instituição, eu gostaria de anunciar a palestra que está na tela aí, Medicina Hiperbárica nas Lesões do Esporte, vai ser realizada no auditório 2, tá? Proferida pelo professor Thomas Brito.